Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at how we can make our scenario finish by using triggers. So before we start, I'm just going to show you what I set up here. It's really simple. I just created a new spawn point over there in the woods. Then I placed down this USSR group and I gave them a defend waypoint. So you can just search for defend and you can drag in the AI waypoint defend. And all I did is increase the completion radius. And then I put it under the group in the hierarchy, but that's not necessary. The important thing is you come to the group and under static waypoints, you assign it. So you have to give it a name. By renaming it, I called it defend1. And then you put it under static waypoints. And now this group will be forced to stay within the blue area and defend that area. Even if they hear shots out here, they won't come investigate. They'll just stay in the blue area and defend it. Then I also placed down the sentry team over here. And I gave them a little patrol cycle. So what I did is I went and searched for patrol. And patrol waypoint is like the move waypoint, but they move slowly instead. So with a move waypoint they run, and with a patrol waypoint they walk slowly. So I first placed down the patrol 1 waypoint over here, didn't change anything about it. Placed down patrol 2, didn't change anything. Then I searched for cycle. You can place on the AI waypoint cycle, just drop that wherever you want. And then the important thing is that in its properties you come down to cycle waypoints and you can add 2 waypoints or more you want. And I said first you go to patrol 1, then you go to patrol 2. And what the cycle waypoint does is after the last waypoint completed, it will just go back to the first waypoint. Basically these two will constantly walk up and down this road. You can also say, for example, they should only do this 3 times and then something else happens. They go to their next waypoint or whatever. In our case, -1 means they will just patrol forever. And now comes the important part. Again, we go to the sentry team and under static waypoints, we assign the patrol cycle waypoint. And that the cycle waypoint then takes care of actually sending them to these specific move waypoints. Again, I put them in a hierarchy, but it's not necessary. It's just so it looks nice in the hierarchy. Okay, that's the quick setup. And now the question is, okay, what do we actually want to do here? What's our mission going to be? Our mission is just going to be to clear this compound. So no enemies should be within here. Right now here's this 1 enemy squad and we want there to be 0 enemies. We're going to do the easy way first and use a trigger that does pretty much everything for us already. We're going to make a more specialized trigger later, and we're going to see how the scripting and the triggers works. So you can then come up with your own ideas. First, you're going to come over to the hierarchy, and down here you have this hierarchy, and then you have create. And in create, you're going to search for trigger. And what we want is a faction control trigger entity. You're just going to drag that in. And the first thing you'll notice is, where's the trigger? You can't see it. Now by default, a trigger does not have a shape. And also a trigger doesn't do any queries by itself. The way they work by default now, I would have to write some script that calls basically trigger.query in a script. For example, you could do that on an event handler, like every time a USSR soldier gets killed, ask the trigger if all of them are dead yet or not. But the easier method is just come down here and say periodic queries, enable that, and then the trigger is going to check by itself every second if something has changed. Now you'll also notice that the trigger doesn't have a shape by default. And if a trigger doesn't have a shape, but you have periodic queries enabled, or you query it per script, it's immediately going to call the OnActivate function. So if a trigger doesn't have a shape, it will immediately activate. So what you can do is, if you want to have a trigger that checks every second if a car has been destroyed, you can just keep the shape to none, and then you can override the OnActivate function and say, if car is destroyed, I don't know, end the game, else do nothing. Right? So whatever the OnActivate function does, that's up to you. You can say in there, please check if all objectives are complete, and so on. It's all up to you. But there's one more thing we'll have to look out for, and that is the trigger activation type. This is important. I think if there's no shape, it doesn't matter what it is, but if you use a shape, this is important. And you can either say first change, first and last change, all changes, or every query. So every query is similar to what I just described. Basically, every time the query runs, OnActivate will be called. This is already the default for when there's no shape. Now, if there is a shape, instead of calling OnActivate immediately, it's going to call a filter function to filter out, well, if something is inside the trigger. For example, you could filter, are there any USSR soldiers within the trigger? And only if there are, then activate would be called. And so this is what the activation type is for. If it's first change, then OnActivate will only be called the first time a USSR soldier walks into the trigger. Now I have no idea how first and last change is supposed to work. How does it know if it's the last change? But all changes would then work like, first time a USSR soldier walks in there, get activated. If a second one also walks in there, it gets activated again. And every query would mean no USSR soldier in there, we don't get activate. As soon as USSR soldier walks in there, we're gonna get OnActivate every second, because that's how often our queries run. So in our case, we really just care about first change, or maybe all changes. Right, so as soon as the first change happens, which is gonna be no enemies in the trigger, then we want to call OnActivate and finish the game. So we do want to have a shape though. We do want to have an area that's supposed to be cleared, not just the entire map. So we're going to select sphere, and what you can see now is not much. You can come down to draw shape though and enable that, and now you can see here's a little ball that's red inside, and that's the trigger. Now this is also visible in game right now. If I were to spawn in and walk over, I would see this red ball. So that can be helpful in game, I guess. But we're gonna disable it again before we spawn in. So I'm just increasing the sphere radius until, say, the entire compound really is in there. I'm gonna move it a bit over here, like that. Cool, so in this entire area, there's no enemies, and then we're gonna activate the trigger. There's a bit more to it, because right now it doesn't know which faction shouldn't be in there. So the owner key, we're gonna put it to US, because we're playing as the US. And then we're gonna say, we wanna have equal to 100% friendlies. So if you mouse over this, and you're gonna get some examples. 1, there are only friendlies. 0, there are only enemies. And 0.5, there's an equal amount. So you could also say if there are more than 80% US soldiers, we win. For example, if you don't want to go hunting down that last guy hiding in a bush somewhere, you could say this, and then that's probably good enough. In our case, we want there to be exactly 100% enemies, friendlies, sorry. And then this should activate. So US is going to be the friendlies, and then everyone who isn't US is going to be the enemy. Right. So this trigger is going to activate as soon as there are no enemies within here. And now we're going to come down to draw shape and disable it again, so it's not in game. Alright, so now our trigger is set up all right and should activate once there are no more enemies in the area. But we still need to actually do something once it does activate. I'm going to hit the plus on script after naming the trigger, so I just renamed it here. Compound clear trigger. I'm going to hit the plus and I'm going to search for activate and OnActivate. And what we want to do in here, well, first of all, I want to display a message to the player saying, hey, you've won. So I'm going to search for SCR pop-up, and there it is, notification. We need to get instance first, and then we can say pop-up message. And you can see this is a bunch of stuff. What's interesting to us is text, which is like the heading, or it's like a title. Then we have duration, how long it should show up. We don't really care about that. Default duration is going to be fine. And important is also text 2, which is like a subtitle. And fade is how quickly it fades in and out. So all we're going to do is we're going to say you cleared the compound, and then text 2 is going to say good job. That's all we're going to do with this. Now, I'm going to come down here to this curly brace, just hit enter a bunch of times. We get some extra space after the function to create our own function. And I'm going to create the function end game. Now, to end the game, I think we did this before, but let's just go over it again. We first need the end game data. So, SCR game mode end data is SCR game mode end data create simple. The reason is going to be SCR game mode end data, and we're going to search for reason and we'll find faction victory, and then the winner faction ID. We'll have to set that to something, so let's search for the faction. We'll need the faction manager. By the way, I have not checked the coding conventions. It could be that you're not supposed to name variables like this, but I'm just going to do it my way. From the faction manager, we're going to get faction by key. And if we wanted, because we're overriding the faction control trigger entity here, we could even say, I think it's in a base faction. Yeah, we could get MS owner faction key. Like this. And that's going to get us the faction that we set up to be the owner over here. So US, so we don't have to hard code it. We still could. Let's do it this way though. And then we have to get the index, and we can say faction manager get faction index from the faction, and then that's what we're going to pass in over here. Index, not faction. Great, now we have the game mode end data. And now all we need to do is actually end the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to want the SCR base game mode. And what we do is we get game and get game mode. Now this will return, as you can see, come on, show the pop-up, the base game mode, not an SCR base game mode. So what we need to do is grab SCR base game mode and call .cast. And now we have an SCR base game mode. Now, cast will fail if your game mode that you're using does not inherit from SCR base game mode. but I think all game modes at the moment do, unless you wrote your own. Then maybe it doesn't, but you should be safe with this. And then we can call game mode end game mode. And the thing is, end game mode is defined in the STR base game mode, not in the base game mode. I don't quite know why you would really want to end any kind of game mode, not just an SCR game mode, but hey, whatever. And then we just pass the data in here. And now what we could do is on activate, we could just say end game and done. But we wanted our player to see the pop-up message. Actually, let's set the duration to something. Come on. I mouse over, and then the pop-up is on top of the mouse and it disappears again. Amazing, isn't it? Let's just control click on it and go to the definition. Okay, it's called duration. So for duration, I'm gonna put 5 seconds. So we want to call end game, but we want to call it after 5 seconds. So what we could do is, I don't know if there's a sleep function here, or delay function or something, but you don't want to really do that because it's going to block the game. And so what you would have done in Arma 3 or in SQF is you would spawn a new thread and then in there sleep and then call the function you want. You're not supposed to do this anymore here, according to coding conventions for Infusion. I think it's enforce script. But so what we're going to do instead is we're going to get the game, and the game has a call queue. So it's kind of like a scheduler. You put stuff in there and it's going to figure it out later. And what we want to do is call later. So I think if you only do call, it's going to call it next frame. And if you do call later, it's going to call it after some delay that you can specify. So the function we want to have called is end game. And what's important here is do not put the open and closing bracket after it. Because if you're just saying end game, that's like putting a pointer to the function. But when you put the parentheses, you're saying executed, and then what you're doing is you're taking the return value, which it doesn't return anything, and you're putting that here. And that's not what we want. We want to have a pointer to the function itself. And for delay, we're going to say 5,000 because it wants milliseconds and not seconds. So after 5 seconds, call end game. And you'll see it has some more stuff like repeat. So you could say repeat is true, and then every 5 seconds it would, well, end the game, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you could query for is someone still alive or something. Let's hit F7 and have it compile the script, and we get no errors, so that's good. And now let's just jump in game and take a look at this. First I'm going to save though. Alright, so we spawned at our new spawn point, but I'm just going to hop into Zeus real quick. And we're going to have a look at these guys. So you can see they're walking to their waypoint down the road, and you can also see these guys are just chilling out, defending the area. So once they go over here, now we can try something fun out. Why don't we just play some guys? You're gonna have a little fight. Good job. So this guy still has his waypoints, and I hope he survives. But critically, these guys, well, they heard the shots and they're now on alert, but they're not leaving the area. They're not going investigate. They're staying here because they have their defend waypoint. Alright, so this guy, I guess he's startled and he's gonna look around for a bit. I have to check if there's more enemies coming. Let's just heal him for fun. But as you can see, he's now making his way back to his other waypoint, which that could take a while. Because he's now crouch walking. So in the meantime, let me just remove some of these enemies. Because I don't want to die trying to show you that it works. So we're going to have 2 enemies left that we'll have to kill once we get down here. And I'm just going to quickly teleport myself behind here. By the way, if you didn't know, if you just point your mouse cursor somewhere and press space, you can either teleport your player there, or if you don't have a player yet, it will spawn one for you. Alright. Crouch walkie guy. Could you just stand up? You can do it. There, and now he turns around and goes back to the other waypoint. So cycle works. That's great. Right. Let's go kill these last 2 guys. And then we should see a message, and 5 seconds later, the game should end. That's one. That's the other. You cleared the compound. Good job. There you go. There's the notification. And now, a few seconds later, US Army has won. Amazing. So this is how you can make a really simple kind of mission with a trigger. And that just clears a compound, for example. But that's a bit boring. Let's make something a bit more. And what we're gonna have is we're gonna make it so that we also have to destroy a car. Hey guys, so just wanted to say this video got way too long. I'm gonna cut it into 2 pieces. You just saw the first one. There's gonna be a next video where we're gonna look at more advanced triggers, and I'll see you there.